All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're putting a single, insanely intense comic panel under the microscope. We're going to try and figure out exactly how an artist conveys extreme power and violence without giving us any surrounding context at all. We'll explore how just one frame does the heavy lifting of an entire action sequence. So get ready, because we're breaking this incredible artwork down together.
It really begs the question, right? How do you actually convey unimaginable power in a single, totally silent drawing? I mean, think about it. This is literally the ultimate challenge for a visual artist. You don't have cinematic sound effects, you don't get dramatic music swells, and you definitely don't have dynamic camera angles. Your one job is to communicate deafening noise, visceral shock, and pure kinetic energy, all within a completely static frame. You've got to make the viewer actually hear the roar and feel the impact, using absolutely nothing but lines, ink, and color.
Hit pause for a second and just take in the raw, brutal impact of what we're looking at here. This is a moment of sheer, devastating, supernatural strength, just totally frozen in time. We've got this dark-robed figure who has effortlessly, and I mean effortlessly, punched their arm straight through the chest of a massive, absolutely terrifying tiger. It instantly grabs your attention. But you know, what's really fascinating here isn't just the initial shock value, it's how that shock value was actually built from the ground up.
Section 1. Anatomy of the strike. Constructing impact.
So starting right at the focal point, let's do a little macro to micro breakdown to see exactly how these specific techniques absolutely sell the physical force of this blow. First off, look at the depth of the strike. The human hand is entirely submerged inside the beast's chest. I mean, the fist is just buried in there. Second, the artist surrounds that entry point with this sudden, super dramatic eruption of blood spray, which instantly gives us the raw physics of the trauma. And third, check out the sheer scale of the man's arm compared to that massive tiger's torso. The arm itself doesn't even look overly muscular, right? Yet it easily pierces an animal the size of a car. It's that physical impossibility that completely tricks our brain into feeling the supernatural weight of the hit.
Moving on to Section 2. Character contrast, amplifying power.
Now, let's talk about contrast and how the artist uses it to make this insane display of power even more impressive. Because, as we know, in visual art, context is literally everything. This whole setup perfectly illustrates a mini-narrative of effortless power. The casual stillness of the human figure makes the chaotic destruction of the beast feel so incredibly jarring. Just look at the comparison. On the left, the attacker is wonderfully subdued, dressed in plain dark robes, maintaining a super grounded stance, wearing simple sandals, and their back is just casually turned away from us. Then, on the right, the beast is the absolute polar opposite. It's giant in scale, violently blood-splattered, roaring in sheer agony, and completely helplessly suspended in midair. The feeling of power here is amplified precisely because the attacker looks like they're barely even trying.
Look specifically right down at the bottom of the frame. The man's simple sandals are planted so firmly on the ground, holding incredibly steady against the staggering weight of those dangling, massive claws right next to them. I mean, those claws are practically the size of the man's entire leg. Visually anchoring the attacker to the floor line really grounds the physics of the image. Think about it. The beast has been lifted completely off its feet by a single arm. So that tiny, seemingly insignificant detail of the sandals just calmly resting on the floor, it creates a massive psychological impact for us as viewers.
All right, Section 3. Shock and pain. Visualizing emotion.
So, moving our eyes up from the actual strike, we really need to understand how the comic medium visually translates internal states, like shock and pure agony, especially when you don't have the luxury of motion or sound. This is where the concept of visual shorthand comes into play. As the definition points out, this is the use of standardized comic symbols, things like floating punctuation or abstract shapes, to instantly communicate a character's internal emotional or physical state right to the reader. It's an absolutely crucial tool. It lets the artist bypass all that clunky exposition and immediately tell us exactly what a character is feeling. Honestly, it's like a brilliant cheat code for visual pacing.
Let's see exactly how that's applied right here in our source material. Notice that floating, jagged exclamation mark, the question mark, and those double circle shock lines just hovering near the tiger's head? These symbols perfectly, and I mean perfectly, encapsulate the beast's sudden absolute bewilderment at being overpowered. Because the tiger isn't just in pain here, it is deeply confused. This is an apex predator that has suddenly, violently found itself on the receiving end of a predator that is vastly superior to it. Those few simple floating white lines are doing an incredible amount of emotional heavy lifting, and they do it without cluttering up the actual artwork.
And finally, Section 4. Symbols and text. anchoring the medium.
Let's pan all the way up to the very top of the image to look at something that might actually seem a little strangely out of place at first glance, but it actually provides this crucial anchor to the medium itself. Up there, in that small speech bubble clipping the top edge, we see the text Nihongo, which translates to Japanese. This adds a really fascinating twist to what is otherwise a super raw, completely wordless combat scene. It kind of breaks the fourth wall just a little bit, firmly grounding this visceral fantasy right back into the highly structured medium of manga, and reminding us that, hey, we're reading a deliberately crafted story.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that when we pull back and look at the entire image again, taking the whole thing in as one unified piece, we aren't just looking at a violent drawing anymore. We are seeing this incredible intricate web of posture, contrast, and visual symbols all working together in perfect harmony. Every single element we've talked about today, from those sandals anchored firmly on the floor to the submerged fist, all the way up to the floating punctuation at the top, every bit of it is a highly deliberate, calculated choice by the artist to maximize the transmission of power directly to you. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider just how much narrative weight an artist can pack into literally one single frame, using nothing but ink and their imagination. I mean, when a single static image speaks this loudly, what is the true limit of visual storytelling? So the next time you're reading a comic or just checking out an illustration, don't just glance at the action and move on. Really look at the choices. Look at the architecture of the impact. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep your eyes open for all those complex stories hiding right there in plain sight.